The desert does not speak of endings, it buries them. And yet, when we look toward the cracked plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the great rivers once fed a land of cities, temples, and gods, we face a mystery unlike any other: the disappearance of Sumer, the world's first civilization. How does something so vast, a people who invented writing, law, astronomy, and monumental architecture, simply vanish? How do the first keepers of knowledge fade into silence, leaving behind only ruins, scattered tablets, and broken myths? The collapse of Sumer is not a single moment. It is a story of decline that stretches across centuries, an unraveling woven from climate, conflict, and the quiet betrayal of time. But perhaps, hidden in this unraveling, is another story. One that suggests the Sumerians did not vanish at all. They only changed form. The great ziggurats, once stairways to the heavens, now sit like broken mountains upon the sand. The canals that once shimmered with water are nothing but dry veins carved into the land. Where kings once boasted of dominion granted by the gods, silence reigns. But history does not accept silence easily. Archaeologists and scholars have long tried to trace the moment when the Sumerians ceased to exist. Was it a drought? Was it war? Or was it something that no clay tablet would ever dare to write down? The records themselves give us hints, but they read like whispers from a dying voice. Around 2100 BCE, the once great city of Ur, the jewel of Sumer, faced devastation. A text known as the Lament for Ur describes the city's fall not in political terms, but in cosmic ones. It tells of gods abandoning their temples, of divine protection lifted, of a land cursed to ruin. Was this just poetic mourning, or a record of something the Sumerians themselves could not explain? By the 3rd millennium BCE, Sumer had already endured cycles of rise and fall. The Akkadian Empire swept through, absorbing their cities and traditions. Babylon rose from the same soil, rewriting the myths with new names. And yet, through it all, the Sumerian tongue still clung to life, used in schools, temples, and rituals, long after the people themselves were said to have disappeared. Here lies the paradox: a civilization that vanishes, but whose language survives. A people erased, but whose gods live on. How does such a disappearance work? Was it death or transformation? Archaeology suggests one culprit: climate. Sediment layers from the region show a devastating drought around 2200 BCE. The rivers shrank. The soil turned to dust. Harvests failed. For a civilization built upon the rhythm of irrigation, this was no mere inconvenience. It was an existential threat. Without water, cities emptied. Without food, temples lost their offerings. And without offerings, gods were abandoned. But the collapse was not uniform. Some cities held on longer, clinging to life until even they were swallowed by hunger and disease. The people of Sumer, faced with an unyielding land, had only one choice: to leave. And leave they did. This is the first great thread of disappearance: Exodus. The Sumerians did not vanish into thin air. They migrated, carrying with them fragments of their world, stories, gods, rituals, knowledge. Like rivers breaking into streams, their culture flowed into Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, and beyond. Wherever they went, their fingerprints remained. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh is but a retelling of older Sumerian myths. The gods of Akkad and Assyria are but renamed Sumerian deities. Even in distant lands, echoes of their thought resound. In Egypt's cosmic order, in the Indus Valley's city planning, in the law codes that spread through the ancient Near East. So, the question shifts. Did Sumer collapse or did it dissolve, seeping into the DNA of civilizations that followed? And yet, the fall of Sumer holds one more enigma. If their culture survived, why does their name not? Why do we remember Babylonia, Assyria, Persia, but not Sumer, the first of them all? The answer may lie not in archaeology, but in intention. Some scholars suggest that the successors of Sumer deliberately erased them, rewriting history in their own image. Babylon, after all, built its empire upon the claim of divine favor. Why leave record of an older people who first claimed the gods? Others suggest something darker, that the Sumerians themselves withdrew their knowledge, that as their world crumbled, they chose to hide what mattered most, leaving behind only fragments while safeguarding the rest in ways we may never fully uncover. What if the greatest loss was not the cities, but the secrets? Consider this. In the ruins of Nippur, Ur, and Eridu, archaeologists have uncovered tens of thousands of clay tablets. But these are not scattered randomly. They are school archives, temple inventories, hymns, myths, and records. As if, in their last moments, the Sumerians ensured that something of their civilization would remain, even if they themselves did not. And yet, thousands more tablets remain untranslated. Others lie buried still, under layers of desert and time. What knowledge is still locked in clay, waiting for the right hands to find it? Perhaps the Sumerians did not vanish. Perhaps they are simply still speaking, but in a language we have not yet fully remembered. The fall of the first civilization is thus not a clean ending, but a riddle. Climate, war, invasion, these explain the surface. But beneath the surface lies something harder to erase: memory. Sumer's memory survives in whispers, in myths retold, in gods renamed, in tablets unread. And it raises the greatest question of all. Did the Sumerians truly disappear? Or did they succeed in what all civilizations dream of: immortality, hidden in the cracks of time? When a civilization falls, it leaves behind two things: ruins and wanderers. The ruins of Sumer still lie scattered across Iraq's southern plains. Broken ziggurats, shattered tablets, collapsed canals. But the wanderers? They carried something far less visible and far more powerful: memory. And it is in this memory, carried across lands and centuries, that we begin to see the outlines of an even greater mystery. The Sumerians did not die. They dispersed. The river that broke into streams. Imagine a mighty river, fed by rainfall in distant mountains, flowing across the land with unstoppable force. Now imagine that river drying, and in its place countless smaller streams weaving outward, carrying fragments of the original waters to places far beyond their source. This is what happened to the Sumerians. Their homeland, once fertile, became fragile. Their temples, once central, became abandoned. But their knowledge, language, rituals, mathematics, law, and mythology did not vanish with the cities. It traveled, like water finding new paths. Curiosity rises here. If we can trace where those streams went, can we also trace what secrets they carried? Into Akkad, the first absorption. The Akkadians were the first to take what Sumer had left behind. Their empire, forged by Sargon the Great around 2300 BCE, swallowed Sumer's cities whole. But unlike later conquerors, the Akkadians did not erase Sumer. They adopted it. They spoke a different tongue, Semitic rather than Sumerian. Yet, they wrote in Sumerian script. They renamed the gods, yet kept their essence. In their royal inscriptions, Akkadian kings claimed the same divine favor once promised to Sumerian rulers. But why? If the Akkadians had power, why bow to a dying people's memory? Perhaps because Sumer's knowledge was already recognized as something beyond ordinary. To rule Mesopotamia, one needed not just soldiers, but the weight of Sumerian legitimacy. And so Sumer lived on, not as a nation, but as a cultural shadow within Akkad. The Babylonian mirror, but the Akkadian empire collapsed, as all empires do. Out of the dust rose Babylon. Babylon's myths, its kingship, its law, all of it was steeped in Sumer. The Epic of Gilgamesh, once a purely Sumerian tale, was rewritten in Akkadian and preserved as Babylon's cultural treasure. The Code of Hammurabi, hailed as the first great law code, is only possible because centuries earlier the Sumerians had written down judgments, contracts, and decrees. Even the gods wore new faces. The Sumerian Enki became Ea, lord of wisdom. Inanna became Ishtar, goddess of war and love. Ninhursag, the life-giver, was remembered as Ninmah or Mami. The Babylonians did not invent from nothing. They inherited, and in inheriting, they preserved. But here is the deeper curiosity. If Babylon's strength came from preserving Sumer, then what exactly was it that Babylon wanted to protect so fiercely? Were myths and rituals enough? Or was there knowledge hidden deeper in Sumer's legacy, knowledge too valuable to let die? The Assyrian flame. From Babylon, the thread runs to Assyria. Assyrian kings like Ashurbanipal boasted of preserving every scrap of ancient knowledge. His famous library at Nineveh contained thousands of tablets, many copied directly from older Sumerian originals. Among them were not just myths, but astronomical charts, medical texts, and incantations. But why would a warrior king like Ashurbanipal treasure clay tablets over conquests? Why spend vast resources copying rituals of long-dead priests? Because Assyria, too, recognized something. The past was power, and the deepest past, Sumer, held the greatest weight of all. One can't help but wonder, did Ashurbanipal know of secrets even we have not yet rediscovered? Was his library not just a collection, but a vault, a final attempt to safeguard fragments of Sumer before they slipped completely away? Echoes in Egypt. The Sumerian streams may have flowed further still. Egypt, though often seen as independent, shows curious parallels with Mesopotamia. Both civilizations built monumental structures aligned with the heavens. Both developed intricate systems of writing early. Both revered gods who walked the line between human and cosmic. Some scholars whisper that contact between Sumer and Egypt may have been more direct than we imagine. Could wandering Sumerians, fleeing drought and collapse, have carried their knowledge westward, leaving behind subtle influences that shaped pharaonic Egypt? The evidence is circumstantial. Shared myths of floods, similar architectural logic, comparable pantheons. But the coincidences pile high enough to stir suspicion. And here curiosity lingers. If Egypt did inherit from Sumer, how much of what we call Egyptian mystery is really Sumerian memory in disguise? The Indus connection. To the east, another civilization rose in the valleys of the Indus, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro. The Indus script remains undeciphered. Their city planning shows an advanced order with grids, drainage, and a sense of civic structure astonishing for its time. And here lies a riddle. The Indus system blooms just as Sumer fades. Could refugees from Mesopotamia have traveled eastward, planting seeds of knowledge? Archaeological finds show Mesopotamian seals in the Indus and Indus artifacts in Mesopotamia. Trade existed, but was it only goods that traveled, or people as well? The Indus Valley's mystery is unsolved. But if one day its script is decoded, will we find threads of Sumer woven into it? The hidden diaspora. Thus, we see Sumer not as a fallen tree, but as a scattered forest. Its roots stretched outward, embedding themselves into neighboring civilizations, hiding in plain sight. But here's the haunting question. What about the ordinary Sumerians? The farmers, artisans, priests, and scribes. Where did they go? Some must have become Babylonians speaking Akkadian, yet whispering Sumerian prayers at night. Some must have traveled further, their names lost in foreign tongues. But did some, a chosen few, carry more than just survival? Did they carry tablets, sealed boxes, secret traditions meant to outlast the collapse? Legends from later Mesopotamian lore speak of hidden tablets, sealed chambers, and knowledge of before the flood, guarded by priests. Could these be memories of Sumerian wisdom preserved through migration? And if so, where are they now? The puzzle of language. The most curious survival of all is language. Sumerian, as a spoken tongue, eventually died. But as a written, sacred, and scholarly language, it endured for centuries, taught in schools, memorized by priests, preserved by scribes. Why? Why keep alive a dead tongue, unless it held value beyond ordinary words? Latin survived after Rome, precisely because it held the keys to law, theology, and science. Was Sumerian preserved for the same reason? Because without it, certain knowledge could not be unlocked. And if so, does that mean secrets of Sumer remain hidden, simply because we have not yet read the right tablets in the right way? The mystery of continuity. We are left with a paradox that burns with curiosity. Sumer disappeared. And yet, Sumer is everywhere, in Babylon's law, in Assyria's libraries, in Egypt's myths, in the Indus Valley's echoes. Even in our modern systems of timekeeping, measurement, and written record. To say the Sumerians vanished is misleading. They dissolved into humanity, becoming part of every civilization that followed. And yet, the sense of something missing lingers. The surface knowledge survived. Myths, rituals, structures. But what about the deeper currents? Did the Sumerians deliberately scatter their wisdom, ensuring no single empire would ever hold it all? Did they break their secrets into fragments, hidden in myths, in numbers, in rituals, waiting for the day humanity would piece them together again? Or did they leave behind something more tangible? Sealed vaults beneath ziggurats, forgotten chambers in desert sands, libraries still waiting to be unearthed? Sumer is gone, and yet, Sumer is everywhere. The first civilization became not a tomb, but a seed. But this raises a final, more dangerous curiosity. If Sumer's knowledge survived the Exodus, where exactly is it now? Civilizations collapse, cities fall, temples crumble. But knowledge has a strange way of surviving. Some knowledge survives openly, passed from teacher to student, copied from tablet to tablet. Other knowledge, however, is too dangerous, too powerful, to be left in the open. It is hidden, buried, disguised as myth, locked in symbols that only the initiated can read. And this is where the story of Sumer takes a turn. Because as much as their cities fell and their people scattered, rumors of hidden archives and forbidden knowledge echo through history like a ghost that refuses to rest. The last scribes of Sumer. When Ur fell around 2000 BCE, a silence spread across Mesopotamia. But in that silence, scribes were still at work. Some tablets from this period show frantic copying, myths, hymns, rituals written again and again, as if time itself were running out. Why such urgency? Why preserve fragments of a civilization that was already dying? One theory whispers that these were not random efforts. They were deliberate preservation projects. Scribes, perhaps under priestly orders, were racing to secure the essence of Sumer before it vanished. If that is true, then where did those preserved works go? We have recovered some, but could others have been deliberately hidden, placed in sealed chambers, buried beneath temples, or carried away by migrating priests? The tablets that never surface. Archaeologists have found tens of thousands of Sumerian tablets. Yet, curious patterns emerge. Many are incomplete, broken, as if torn from larger archives. Others are purely administrative. Records of grain, livestock, contracts. While mythological and scientific texts are rarer. And in nearly every excavation report, whispers emerge of tablets that vanish into private collections, never to be seen again. It raises a haunting possibility. What if the most important texts were deliberately withheld from history? Could there be entire caches of Sumerian wisdom, untouched, untranslated, and unseen, sitting in museum basements, private vaults, or buried still beneath Mesopotamia's sands? The underground chambers of Eridu, Sumer's first city, home of Enki, the god of wisdom and waters. Legends speak of underground chambers beneath its temples, places where priests communed with their god, where rituals older than history itself were performed. What if those chambers were more than ritual spaces? What if they were vaults of preservation? Some researchers speculate that Eridu, being the first city, may have been the first archive. A place where knowledge was not only born, but also protected. But the ruins of Eridu remain largely unexcavated, hidden under layers of sand and silt. Is it possible that beneath those ruins lie sealed rooms, untouched since the fall of Sumer, still holding the knowledge its people refused to surrender to time? The myth of the Tablets of Destiny. We have already encountered the legend of the Tablets of Destiny, mythical records said to grant divine authority and cosmic power. But myths in Mesopotamia often hid truths in symbolic form. Could the Tablets of Destiny have been real, not magical talismans but collections of encoded knowledge, scientific principles, astronomical data, medical wisdom, preserved in clay, disguised as myth so only the initiated would seek them? If so, then the disappearance of Sumer may not be a story of total loss. It may be a story of deliberate concealment. The priests and the secret schools. We know that long after Sumer's collapse, scribal schools still taught the Sumerian language. Priests memorized hymns in a tongue no one spoke anymore. Why? Perhaps because hidden within those hymns were codes. Perhaps because the language itself carried meanings that could not be translated into Akkadian or Babylonian without losing power. Secret schools, sacred scripts, rituals performed in a dead language. This sounds less like nostalgia and more like guardianship. Were the priests of later Mesopotamia not simply worshippers, but custodians of Sumer's last secrets? The Lost Library's history gives us fragments of vanished archives. The Library of Ashurbanipal, containing copies of older Sumerian works. But were all the texts copied? Or were some locked away, withheld even then? The Library of Sippar, described in Babylonian texts as containing wisdom from before the flood. Yet, its location has never been found. The Archive of Nippur, only partially excavated, with reports of entire rooms sealed by collapsed walls. If these libraries truly existed, and if some remain untouched, what could they contain? Medicine that modern science has forgotten? Astronomical cycles spanning millennia? Or something even stranger, records of human origins, encoded myths pointing to truths we still struggle to grasp? The curiosity of disguise. Here lies the most tantalizing clue. The Sumerians may have disguised their deepest knowledge inside mythology. The gods who walked among men, the tales of floods, descents, ascensions, the curses and spells, the demons and destinies. To the ordinary, these were stories. To the priests, they may have been metaphors for systems of knowledge. Could medicine have been hidden in the myth of Ninhursag? Could astronomy be disguised in the journeys of Inanna? Could genetic memory or song or something like it be wrapped in the myths of Enki shaping mankind? If so, then the knowledge of Sumer is not lost at all. It is in front of us. If only we know how to read it. The modern puzzle. Even today, archaeologists admit, the majority of Sumerian tablets remain untranslated. Many lie untouched in museum storerooms. Some estimates suggest that for every tablet we have studied, dozens remain unread. This means the story of Sumer is not finished. Its voice is still speaking, muffled by clay and dust, waiting for our ears to listen. But what if the untranslated tablets contain something we are not prepared for? What if the myths we dismissed as fantasy turn out to be encoded science? What if Sumer's hidden knowledge, once unlocked, forces us to rewrite the story of human civilization itself? The curiosity becomes almost unbearable. Are we living in an age just before Sumer speaks again? The unanswered questions. So we are left with riddles. Did the last Sumerian scribes hide archives in vaults beneath their temples? Do unexcavated ruins like Eridu still guard untouched rooms of knowledge? Are the untranslated tablets in museum basements the true keys to understanding their world? And if so, why do we feel as though something, or someone, wanted this knowledge to survive, but remain hidden until the right time? The disappearance of Sumer is no longer just the fall of a people. It is the story of knowledge deliberately concealed. And that leads us forward to Gateways to Eternity, where we confront the possibility that the Sumerians did not just preserve knowledge in clay, but encoded it in structures, rituals, and myths designed as gateways, doors that lead not to memory, but to something beyond time itself. The disappearance of Sumer, collapse, exodus, and the knowledge that vanished. The map of the ancient Near East tells a strange story. Where once the cities of Sumer had blazed with life, Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, only shadows remain. Their walls are silent, their ziggurats buried in sand. And yet, the very moment Sumer fades from history, other civilizations ignite. Babylon rises, Assyria grows powerful, Egypt enters a golden age. Even the far-off Indus Valley and mysterious lands to the west seem to stir. It feels less like a disappearance, and more like a dispersal. But dispersal of what? Of people? Of culture? Of knowledge that could not simply vanish into dust? The Great Silence after the fall. Archaeologists often speak of a dark age following the collapse of Sumer. After centuries of dazzling inventions, from mathematics to law, irrigation to writing, the record suddenly falls quiet. Clay tablets no longer multiply with the same energy. Temples are abandoned. Some cities are entirely deserted. But silence in history is never simple. When a people vanish, their stories rarely end. They echo. And if we listen carefully, those echoes are not confined to Mesopotamia. Could it be that Sumer's knowledge was never truly lost, but instead carried outward like glowing embers, igniting new fires across the ancient world? The Babylonian Flame. Let's begin with Babylon. By the time Hammurabi's Babylon emerges in the 18th century BCE, the Sumerians themselves have already vanished. But the Babylonians never claimed invention. They claimed inheritance. They called their great god Marduk, but his myths bear the fingerprints of Sumerian Enlil and Enki. Their astronomy, their calendars, even the cuneiform script they used, all trace back to Sumerian blueprints. Hammurabi's famous Code of Laws, often hailed as the world's first, is in fact modeled on older Sumerian precedents. It's as though Babylon was less a new civilization and more a vessel, carrying forward fragments of Sumer's brilliance. But here lies the riddle. How much did the Babylonians really understand of what they inherited? Were they simply repeating forms, rituals, symbols, structures, whose original purpose had already been forgotten? Egypt and the Sumerian shadow. The Egyptians, too, seem to stand in Sumer's shadow. Their pyramids and temples, their obsession with the afterlife, their use of sacred writing, all echo themes already alive in Mesopotamia. Some researchers whisper that the very idea of monumental architecture may have flowed along trade routes from Sumer to the Nile. After all, Eridu's temples and Uruk's ziggurats were already centuries old when Egypt's first pyramids rose from desert sands. And the myths? Egypt's gods walk a stage not unlike Sumer's pantheon. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, feels strangely close to Enki, keeper of hidden knowledge. Osiris, lord of the dead, mirrors the underworld journeys described in Sumerian laments. Coincidence? Or cultural transmission carried by wandering priests, merchants, and exiles from a fallen land? The Indus connection. Further east, across deserts and mountains, lies the Indus Valley civilization. At first glance, its cities, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, seem entirely separate. Their writing remains undeciphered, their gods obscured. But when archaeologists unearthed tiny seals from the Indus, stamped with mysterious symbols, comparisons to Sumerian cylinder seals were impossible to ignore. Trade between Sumer and the Indus is well attested. Boats carried timber, lapis lazuli, and exotic goods along the Persian Gulf. So what else might have traveled with those goods? Words? Beliefs? Techniques that left only faint fingerprints behind? It is tempting, dangerously tempting, to imagine that Sumer's collapse did not erase its genius, but scattered it like seeds, some sprouting in the Nile Valley, others on the banks of the Indus, the hidden custodians. But here the trail twists darker. If Sumer's wisdom truly spread so widely, why does so much of it seem incomplete? Why do the inheritors echo fragments, but not the whole? This leads some scholars, and many storytellers, to a radical thought. Perhaps the most profound secrets of Sumer were never left to chance at all. Perhaps they were deliberately hidden. Imagine a priesthood, watching their world collapse. Armies at the gates, temples burning, libraries threatened. What do? Do they let their sacred knowledge vanish? Or do they encode it in rituals, in myths, in architecture, ensuring only those worthy can ever find it again? This is not fantasy. In Mesopotamia itself, we find hints of buried tablets, records placed in foundation deposits beneath temples, meant to last through destruction and rebuilding. Kings often spoke of restoring ancient inscriptions they had uncovered, secrets buried by their ancestors. Could there have been other caches, hidden far deeper, containing wisdom never meant for ordinary eyes? The exodus of knowledge legends outside Mesopotamia seem to whisper of such an exodus. The Greeks spoke of Oans, a fish-clad figure who rose from the waters to teach humankind language, agriculture, and law, unmistakably echoing the Sumerian Apkallu. Jewish tradition, too, preserves echoes. Abraham, after all, is said to have come from Ur of the Chaldees. Did he carry with him not only faith, but fragments of Mesopotamian lore? Even the Bible's flood narrative, so close to the Sumerian story of Utnapishtim, suggests that cultural memory traveled far beyond its birthplace. The more we trace, the more the web spreads, but at its center remains the same silent mystery. The Sumerians are gone, yet their fingerprints remain everywhere. The vanishing point. And so we arrive at the greatest paradox of all. A civilization that gave the world its first writing, its first schools, its first laws, its first maps of the heavens, somehow disappears so completely that for centuries, humanity forgets it ever existed. By the time Greek philosophers walked the streets of Athens, the name Sumer was gone. Buried beneath layers of later empires, their memory dissolved. Not until the 19th century, when archaeologists cracked open clay tablets, did the Sumerians re-emerge into human knowledge. How does a people so foundational vanish so thoroughly? And why does their absence feel less like extinction and more like deliberate erasure? The final question. The silence of Sumer is not just an archaeological puzzle. It is a wound in history. Because when they vanished, so too did something more profound. A way of seeing the world. A belief that humanity and the divine could meet in the space between earth and sky. A vision of order, balance, and cosmic law that was never fully inherited by those who followed. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it was inherited, but concealed, preserved by secret custodians, waiting in hidden chambers or encoded myths for the right moment to return. And if that is true, then the disappearance of Sumer is not an ending. It is a silence pregnant with possibility. The last secret of Sumer, the ruins of Sumer, still sleep beneath the Mesopotamian soil. Shattered ziggurats, clay tablets chipped by time, and broken statues half buried in sand. They stand as the last fragments of a civilization that once called itself the first. But the greater mystery is not simply how they disappeared. It is how their voice still echoes across ages, faint but undeniable, shaping empires that followed. When the Sumerians fell, their people did not simply vanish. They walked into other lands, carrying memories of their gods, their rituals, their stories. Babylon rose, and in its libraries, echoes of Sumer were whispered again. Assyria carried their myths on the sharp edge of empire. Even Egypt, far away, bore traces of symbols and rituals that hint at shared roots. Was it diffusion or something deeper, a deliberate preservation of forbidden knowledge? And yet, there are silences, whole tablets missing from the record, stories of gods abruptly ending mid-line, a culture that prided itself on recording everything, suddenly gone, as if erased by design. Here lies the haunting question. Did someone want Sumer's secrets buried? The myths tell of floods, of gods descending and withdrawing, of wisdom given and then reclaimed. Could it be that the Sumerians held something so powerful, so dangerous, that it could not be allowed to survive openly? Knowledge of the stars, of the cycles of time, of gateways between realms. Archaeologists dismiss this as speculation. But when we piece together fragments, the ziggurats aligned to constellations, the sudden leaps in mathematics, the strange uniformity of myths across the ancient world, it becomes harder to explain by coincidence alone. Imagine this. When Sumer fell, its priests, scribes, and stargazers did not all vanish into the dust. Perhaps they walked quietly into foreign lands, disguising their knowledge in new tongues, hiding their wisdom in myth and symbol, waiting for future civilizations to stumble upon them again. And maybe, just maybe, they succeeded. For even today, thousands of years later, we still find ourselves haunted by their stories. The tale of a great flood, the search for immortality, the binding power of written law, the cosmic council of gods. These are not relics that died with Sumer. They are myths still alive in the veins of humanity. It is as though the Sumerians never truly left. Their voices whisper through every temple built after them, every law carved into stone, every story told of gods who shaped mankind. So perhaps the Sumerians did not vanish. Perhaps they became immortal, not in flesh, but in memory, in story, in the very foundations of human civilization. And yet, one question remains, heavy and unresolved. What part of their knowledge is still hidden? For among the tablets that survived, there are gaps, lines missing, endings unwritten. Entire rooms once filled with records are now piles of clay shards. We may never know what was lost, or what was deliberately concealed. But if the Sumerians themselves believed in anything, it was cycles, time repeating, knowledge resurfacing when it was meant to. Perhaps their secrets are not gone. Perhaps they are waiting, waiting beneath the sands, waiting in the fragments of clay we have not yet unearthed, waiting in stories we still do not fully understand. The disappearance of Sumer is not the end of their story. It is the beginning of a mystery that stretches across civilizations, across centuries, across us all. For in the silence of their ruins, one truth still lingers. Civilizations may fall, but knowledge never truly dies.